My name's Niall Bear. I'm the CMO of Future Proof, and I'm definitely the third lowest CMO on the stage because I'm joined by two of the sharpest CMOs in wealth management. Really excited for this session. So why don't we introduce ourselves real quick? Tell us about your firm a little bit, where you started, where it's at now, maybe head count, AUM, registration type, things like that, and then we can just get right into it.
Good morning. I'm Allie Warner with Beacon Point Advisors. Today, we are north of $36 billion in assets under management with about 60 offices and more than 500 professional team members around the country. I started with Beacon Point 14 years ago as an intern when we had one office, 22 people, and no marketing department. So it's been a ride. It's been a lot of growth, and it's been a lot of fun, and happy to share some of those experiences.
I'm Cami Doder. I'm the CMO and a partner at Aspiriant, the co-host of our Money Tales podcast. Aspiriant's $15 billion in AUM. We're an owner-operated, so about a third of our professionals, around 80 of us, are owner-operators, helping individuals and families. And I love the origin story. I started, I think, 100 years ago with Aspiriant, and I was head of sales and marketing, and wearing a million hats. And as we've grown, we've invested and been able to specialize, which has been really important. And doesn't feel like long ago, but in 2016, I really focused on the marketing area and became our CMO.
Love it. All right. So I have kind of an open question. You hear it all the time with people who ask these kind of vague questions. What inspires you? But I'm not going to go there. But something I think is interesting is, I've worked in marketing at 5 different companies, 4 different companies in wealth management specifically, and it's felt like everybody has had a completely different definition of what marketing is. And as, the environment shifts, the duties of the marketing team has grown dramatically. So I'd love to hear just from you two what marketing really means for you and your firm and how that might be different for other firms that are out there.
We take a little bit of a different approach, kind of as Niall mentioned. So I look at marketing actually as an opportunity cost of time to our advisors. So we also bifurcate business development and marketing and what we do within those different areas of focus. Our advisors should truly be focused on their business development initiatives and their efforts there. The marketing elements that they would love to have more time in their day to do, my team does at scale. So it's creating their digital brand. It's obviously the marketing materials and making sure those are compliance approved, and the campaign strategies and the email content, and creating that hug, if you will, around the client experience. So it is a little bit different. I used to wear both those hats, and as we continue to grow, we really had to make a conscious effort to focus that and coach our advisors and help them have that experience and allow them to execute. And we do kind of the behind the scenes elements that are required for that brand expansion and that brand recognition that they just really don't have time for.
Yes, Anne. So good. I'll just bring it up. So I think of it as brand and growth. And when I think about brand, I think about, of course, your voice, your tone, and all the things. But I think of it as a trust. This is the trust our clients place in us, and building out that trust with all the different initiatives we do. And with that, then executing on our organic growth efforts and inorganic.
So Cam, I'm going to volley right back to you.
Ready.
We had talked about this previously, and I believe you said that organic growth is like the golden goose of what you're looking for an RIA specifically. So if you could explain the nuances of the value of just knowing the differences between organic and inorganic growth and why that's important to you and why you focus on those two things differently.
The golden goose, I love this. So organic growth, one client at a time. Inorganic growth, helping future organizations become part of Aspiriant. The messages have to be consistent, right? You can't be inconsistent here. But they are different approaches and different stories. You're connecting the value. If you're a client, you're solving their questions, right? You're solving their needs. The less we talk and the more we hear what their needs are, the better. That's organic growth. It's sort of similar in inorganic growth. What are you solving for? You've gotten to a point you can't scale, but it's a different conversation, and we got to tell both in our marketing efforts.
Over to you, Allie.
Yeah, they're different stories. We're sitting on the same side of the table, on the B2B side where we're partnering with other firms, that's an easier conversation to be had. But we're very hyper cognizant of making sure that that messaging matches the organic side because clients see that as well. So having thoughtful growth is really important so there's no risk related to that client experience or you're growing too fast or something like, along those lines. From an organic growth, obviously that's a critical important to the valuation of your business and obviously the long-term success of advisors and your team and being able to attract talent. It's hard. It starts with the client experience, that advice experience, being able to have that referral base. And really, you shouldn't be doing marketing if you're not already having organic referrals at a strong level. Because if you don't have that fundamental basis, it's really hard for the marketing teams to build upon that. Or if they can and you get those prospects in the door, the expectations fall short. So really, really being consistent with your operations team and your client service team and your advisors and making sure that that value stack, that advice stack, that value proposition is consistent across all of your team members and all of your offices, or if you have one office, just your team. And I always think about our one office versus doing this at the corporate level, right? And it's all about the individual advisor. While we do things at scale and we try and maintain that personalization with that corporate brand wrap around the advisor, it's always about that meeting with the client, that one-on-one relationship, and that's what really drives the needle. So anything we can do to support that and that advisor, that's our goal on the organic side.
So two little factoids that I thought were interesting. One, yesterday Peter Maluk was on this stage, shared that they didn't really have marketing that much until they got to 500 million in revenue, which I thought was a fascinating little fact. Another one is, we take in a lot of data when everybody registers for this event. The number one thing that advisors said that their number one area of interest was marketing and growth.
Hallelujah.
It was so good for us. But not a lot of CMOs, I would say, in the industry. If we tried to fill up 4,000 people CMOs in wealth management, wouldn't be able to get it because there's just not a lot of us. How has marketing changed for you as you've been on the ground floor and that client experience as you started out as an emerging RIA and then have grown to much larger RIAs in the space. How has that adjusted over time?
I can run with that. So the landscape today is very different than it was 5 years ago, thanks to the pandemic. I sarcastically say that the pandemic was good for marketing because it made clients adapt to digital environments faster. I don't know how many of you did, maybe semi-annual meetings or every other meeting via Zoom with your client, and you got to see their kiddos running in the background or their dog barking or whatever. It humanized people. But it also took away that interpersonal relationship by doing everything in person. So we've made strategic adjustments to have a combination thereof. But you'd be amazed what you can do with a very small marketing team and a very small budget.
Yes.
I have a team of 4 incredible ladies, and we serve 60 offices and 500 advisors. So we are the most efficient, very process-oriented, and we track all the different campaigns that we do. They may be small, they may be big, but we learn from those and we adjust and we move the needle.
Love it. Small and mighty team. What are the key roles that you hired for when you started being able to build that team? Something that is floating around the marketing world is a full stack marketer, which I think is getting bigger and bigger. Or do you specialize early and kind of build around that? Is it unique to you? How did you think about bringing on that team as you started growing into that role? Cami, I'll start with you on that.
It is a build. So we started, and I think everyone starts with more of a generalist approach. You can't start with specialists. And once you've got, for those of you who listened to John Wernz yesterday, I like how he talked about the 3 stages of marketing, and you can't jump a stage. So there's the foundational work, and that's where the generalists come in. Once you get to the next stage, which I think he called the content stage, that's where you might be investing in your specialist. For us at Aspiriant, we had the generalists in marketing, where you're taking off your hat and changing roles throughout the day. We hired our first editorial manager, which became a communications manager because content is so critical, so critical. So that was our first specialist. Then as we were building out, we kind of got to the third stage of our digital strategy. You can't hand off digital leads to busy wealth managers. That's when we invested in a BDR role. So the specialists come in as you build your organization. And I'll say, I'd be remiss to say that it's not just internal, you have external teams. So finding the right, and for us, it's a PR firm, great PR firm we're working with. It's our digital agency. And we went through a few of these. You don't find the right one in the beginning, and you have a tiny budget, and you got to get creative. And we have a web dev agency. So I think of that as the team, internal and external.
Love it. Allie?
Yeah, when I was a single solo marketing person of one till about, I think we were maybe 10 billion in assets under management. But I had buy-in from my entire team in that office. I mean, the advisors were writing content for me. I put up a 12-month content calendar and I rotated it so it was thoughtful to not impact their time too much and it wasn't take away from their client meetings or their prospect meetings. I played sports, so I have a coaching mentality. I can't help it. My team it literally is a team. I hire great people. I get out of their way. I try and set strategy and I let them run with it. I want them to bring ideas to me. I want them to feel invested in their outcomes. And you're right, we started as generalists. We were the jack of all trades. And now I have gals that specialize on the social media front and the digital marketing campaigns. And I have gals that focus on the press and media and the email drips and those type of content deliverables. So, but they all are integrated. And that's the thing, is you really have to have an efficient team, because while someone may be working on digital social media, well, that should correlate with what you're sending in emails, because you're creating this atmosphere and this consistent storytelling that should be across all of your different mediums. So there's a lot of that to build a team. All the gals that are on my team are in their early 20s. So I'm not saying that has an impact one way or the other, but you don't have to have all this crazy experience. You just need to execute and do it. We do now have third-party vendors and support, but that can be expensive. So we did everything in-house until we just grew to a scale that we couldn't do that anymore. And with the world that it is now, we need specialists, SEO specialists, all these different elements that we now have the budget to do. But we did it before as well as we could without that budget, and we are today being able to expand that.
Love it. What's your sport?
Volleyball. I'm really short. Libero. Back row
Go
defense.
volleyball.
I think if my team hears me say another baseball metaphor about business, they're
stick
gonna,
to volleyball
they're gonna
today.
throw a baseball at me. So
There's some sand volley courts down the road if anybody wants to get a pickup game going.
Let's talk about budgets a little bit. And as you've grown, how do you think about allocating budgets, and how has that changed over the years?
Did I go first last time? I can't remember. You go first.
Okay. So again, this is also, well, the budget is set at our corporate level, and it doesn't matter the size of your firm, that's always going to be the case. Again, this is where the buying kind of comes in, and being able to take some risk and allocating. I mean, you're going to hear budgets ranging from 0.5% to 12%. It's across the board.
So percent of revenue is how they're
percent of revenue is how we do it.
Yep.
And then, each of our different offices have a different allocation as a percentage of their revenue to do their local marketing efforts that we help them support and design those strategic plans, in addition to the corporate strategies that we deploy. And then as we have success, or we can show proof of concept, then we can expand those. Or we decide at the corporate team level that we want to experiment with this, so we're going to allocate a particular extra budget if we have that in each annual budget review. So that's the percentage of revenue, and then we kind of go from there and massage a little bit.
I'm just going to use analogies because we're both volleyball players. When we think about budget, so we too talk about percentage of revenue, but it's in support of the goals of the organization, very importantly tied. So for volleyball, you got to get your foundation, your bump, set, spike. And that's the foundation work. That's a big allocation of our budget. Then the trick plays. Once we've got the foundation set, then the trick plays come in. That's where you got to test your marketing strategy. So we have an allocation of our budget to be able to test. And you said it's proof of concept. We're constantly doing proof of concepts. And that's marketing. You got to test all the time, and it's not all going to work. It's great to stop stuff. And I think in our industry, we'd never roll out something for clients unless it is perfect. Perfect. In marketing, you've got to roll stuff out that's imperfect. And you got to test, and you got to iterate, and you throw some stuff out, and some stuff is successful.
Yeah, and from an analytics perspective, if you don't mind, Nala.
No, yes, that was my follow-on.
Indirect and direct ROI. And it's hard to quantify. I mean, we have lots of spreadsheets and lots of data to show the proof of the campaigns and did we have any prospects come through the door, et cetera? What did advisors close those prospects? But also, I think of our social media auto posting strategy. Well, we had hundreds of thousands of engagements in a month. But those aren't necessarily new clients, but that visibility is its own digital branding campaign without having to have that large spend across those different social platforms. So being able to understand that indirect ROI as it correlates to the true ROI allows the corporate team and other members of your firm to be those risk takers in those kind of trick play areas.
So speaking of measuring success along those lines, are there things that you're measuring specifically, simple stuff like acquisition costs, long-term value of a client, things like that, net new flows, and then when you bring in a new firm in an M&A process, are you hoping that they're measuring the same things, or when you're going through due diligence, are you kind of introducing those measurements to them that are unique to your firm, that might be useful for them in the past, but as they come into your culture, it needs to shift a little bit so that you can make sure they're successful?
I'll start on the, so measurement is key, but I want it in the beginning, we're not measuring, we're just executing. So as we've matured as an organization, we're measuring a lot more, using the data, using the tools to be able to understand what's working, what's not. So we do, when we have campaigns, cost per click, cost per lead, we're measuring all the different stages. We're looking at our Google metrics and understanding what's going on within Google, doing what we can in measuring SEO. So measurement, just as we've grown, has become, because we have now the capabilities to do it, we can now use the data, and it's really important. Otherwise, a lot of it was a little bit of testing and guessing, and that's not a strategy. So really using that. I'll let you talk about inorganic.
Yeah, this is also where bifurcating marketing and business development has played a key role. Our business development team is tracking net flows, tracking all of the different types of referrals to the individual numbers. And we work very, very closely in hand, and we have more of that artistic analytics. I mean, we're looking at the Google Analytics, we're looking at our SEO optimization and our lead flow, but we're really tracking lead source and lead influence because we're part of that brand and storytelling. So if we can see that 80% of the referrals came from XYZ, then we know where we need to put more money. So, and we break that down, and there's 50 different lead sources that we're managing.
Is that last touch attribution for your lead source, or is it a composite?
It's a composite. So, for example, a new client may come in, and while they may have been referred by another client, they read a piece or saw a video on raising financially savvy children that we put out, and they made a point to tell the advisor that that was a really big reason why their wife wanted to come meet them. Well, that's a lead influence. That's super important for us to know, even though that wasn't the true lead source. So we're able to track those different things in our CRM that the advisors can very easily put in, and we can look at those reports at the granular level and at the firm scale and say, okay, what programs are working to support this conversation and making this business cycle shorter for our advisors. From the M&A perspective, which we didn't, a lot of the firms that we talk to don't have the bandwidth for this. So marketing's the shiny toy, which is great. We love that. We love to be able to tell them what we can do for them. And 95% of what we do, they don't lift a finger for that. They get to plug right in and off they go, and they get to capitalize on that. So it's our job is to be able to show them how we can help and just boost on what they're already doing.
Love it. Cam, you said communications is so critical in content. And I know some people are thinking, what's happening on social media or email, but I have the feeling that you're also talking about your clients that you're communicating to that the public might not see. So how do you balance, as you've scaled up, the personalization of those comms that are going to clients versus being able to distribute something in mass?
Yeah, it's once again the challenge, the tension of the industry. You want to be as personalized as possible, but you got to react, and you also have a lean team. You talked about it, Ali. So we balance it. It just depends on the communication. I'll give an example, surveys. The more niche and focused we can survey, it helps us with our analytics as well. If you're surveying certain segments so you understand what's going on, that's an area where we do a lot of segmentation. We are not at that point where we understand that we wrote an article on, Bitcoin because it's exciting. And we know all the clients out there who are interested in Bitcoin and we're sending it to them. We're not at that point. And I think that's okay.
How far out is your comms calendar? Is it kind of proactive on what's happening next month, or is it let's plan out the whole year?
We sort of plan out the whole year and
Okay.
then insert as things come up, right? So we want a plan, and then the plan is broken within.
Always broken.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What about you, Allie?
Yeah, we build our content calendar out for an annual year, and then we always post what we're sending. It's totally transparent to every single employee in the firm, and they know if we need to make real-time adjustments because the market's going crazy, and we want to do a update webinar with our CIO across the firm for clients. You know, we can mix and match, and we'll change that up and change the dates so everybody knows what's going out to clients, and they get the exact same copy of that in their inbox. So we call it the last 1%. They're not having to create all that content, but they can take that and drip one-on-one. Hi, Mr. Prospect. You know, we just chatted about this in our last week in our coffee. You know, I think this would be a great webinar for you to attend, and then let's sync up after. You know, so they can focus their time, that opportunity cost of time, to create the email, send the email, and focus on that relationship. And that's where we brand at the corporate level. We really do make a point to start with branding at Beacon Point. It's continuity as well, and all of our firms that have partnered with us are totally fine with that. It gives their team bandwidth. If their team grows and they need to adjust some relationships, it's really, again, we do have a big sports culture at Beacon Point. It is a team-oriented element. We also do personalized campaigns, but we work with the offices and say, who's gonna be your power user in this office for this campaign? So we can do this at scale, and not for 400 advisors per se, but for 60 different campaigns. So it's a little bit of a hybrid, and it's worked really well thus far, and it's also kind of an experiment. We see, does having a personal advisor face actually increase click rates? Does it create additional CTA lead capture? Is it making a difference? And we can cross-connect those campaigns.
You know, another way to say future-proof is forward compatibility, but the Forward Compatibility Festival just didn't have a ring to it. But when we think about marketing, it has shifted so much in the last 10 years, 5 years, even since COVID. How are you thinking about marketing today so that you know that, you know, we're not going to have to throw everything out in the next 2 to 5 years? What are things that you think won't be disrupted in your marketing, and then other areas that you're kind of like ready to let go of, you know, once we cross that threshold?
I don't think I have the crystal ball. I think that's what you're doing and you're iterating. Gosh, it's a good question. What do I think I'm going to throw out? I don't know, but we do throw stuff out. I mean, we used to do, and this is evolution of organizations, as we were generating digital leads, we'd hand them off to our wealth managers. I talked about that. Our wealth managers totally leaned in, but they're busy serving clients. We kind of threw out that strategy. We didn't throw out the wealth managers. They're really important. But we threw out the strategy, and that's when we rethought, and we brought in a business development rep because the leads were strong. We wanted someone who could really work them well. So I guess we iterate and throw out along the way.
Got it.
The digital space is so saturated now. I mean, as marketers,
Really
we
is.
feel this. Before COVID, it wasn't that way. So getting through the noise is really difficult, and it'll be really interesting to see the social media platforms and how they evolve. You know, the quality of the demographics and the audience groups that you're choosing, you know, we're seeing some of that kind of dissipate a little bit, and the quality of the leads that come through there. So we may pivot away from that. We may continue some different experience on different platforms. I think the testimonial opportunities and the client storytelling is huge, so long as you remain compliant. But being able to humanize some of that in a way that can be scaled, and doing that in the right locations across your different website and in your own social media areas and your different emails, and creating that story, I think is going to be expanded. Wealth advice is human. You know, I mean, we were all worried about the robo-advisor platforms taking all of our jobs, right? Well, robo-advisors are great tools, but we're all still here today, right? So I think some of the tech is going to change. AI is another area that we're, you know, chomping at the bit for. We're using some of it now, but predictive AI, you know, being able to get in front of people with their life experiences, knowing what's coming down the pipeline. Right now, we don't have data or AI is just not there yet. You know, if we can help somebody, if we know that they have an ailing family member, you know, because they're pulling feeds from their social media, well, they darn well better have that right, so that we can help them prepare their family and any of their estate planning documents and any of the emotional support that they need should a life event be happening for them. But it's also horrible if you get that wrong and market to that. So we're conservative, and we don't do that without knowing, you know, that might be happening, or we do it in a broad messaging way that say, hey, we're here for you when this happens. Don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we will take care of you. So there's a lot of that's going to play a role in how we shift campaigns.
Love it. I have a great question here that I really like for solo or small team advisors who already have a solid referral base, which is where a lot of advisors start. All the way up to $1 billion, I feel like you could really grow with a good referral system. What's the first step outside of that?
So you're getting leads from your clients. Awesome. That's most important. This is where people want, like, what's the next thing? There is no specific next thing. I think you gotta understand your market. You gotta understand who you're targeting and do some really important tests for those niches. I don't think there is one thing you go after.
A big part or value of joining Beacon Point is we're part of the referral programs with the custodial channels, all of them, and that's a great, just natural boost, if you will, outside of just organic client referrals. A lot of our leads come from our website, but they don't necessarily originate from our website. They click on a blog post from our social media that brings them to the website. Then they look at our services page, and then they check out an advisor bio, and they submit that they want to set up a call or a meeting. And so that's kind of that whole atmosphere. So my recommendation was, outside of your organic client referrals, that if you haven't created that atmosphere, even if it's small, do it, because that matters on the search engine side. And when someone searches your name and your website, well, if you're not active on LinkedIn, that's a huge SEO value to your brand and being able to be seen, and they do a lot of that work for you. So if you're creating great content, and again, there's noise out there's so much content, but if you're not doing that, other advisors are, or we're doing it for them, and they're gonna show up before you.
Right. Yeah, I hear that from some advisors, that we're growing without a digital storefront whatsoever, and I'll say, well, you're growing in spite of not having a digital storefront. So creating that environment is great. What areas of growth do you think, let's say, a sub $1 billion firm has that's a competitive advantage for larger firms like yourselves that you would love to see them take advantage? Or you think that they can do that maybe others can't, that they should think about? Or if you could go back in time and you're able to do it again, how would you approach it or think about it? Uh-oh.
No, that's going back a really long
Please
ways.
don't take me back.
I'm noticing time.
I don't know if there's anything I would do differently. I just would try and go faster.
Yeah.
And we go so fast, so I don't know if that's helpful, but I think what Beacon Point did early, when I was an intern, I told our CEO, Shannon, I said, I'm not leaving when I graduate from grad school, so find me a job. And they invested in me. And I proved that I could, create the story for them and create this value proposition and create this consistent storytelling that supported the already great client service experience and advice experience. And, you need that anchor. You have to have that fulcrum point, even if you use third-party outside members, because we're like boots on the ground and we can execute and deploy. And if you don't have that fulcrum point, it's kind of a waste of money sometimes, because it's just really fragmented, and you have to have consistency. Even if you're changing different campaigns or experimenting, you have to have that anchor.
I'll add one last thing. Really understand your target audience. We tend to try and be all things to all people. We help anybody with money. No, we don't. You have a target, you have a niche. The sooner we had gone into and really declaring and understanding our brand, we didn't take that time in the beginning. You're running, you're fast, you're furious. But once you really understand that, then everything you can write to that future client. You understand what's going on in their life, and everything can build from that.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for coming to Future Proof. Great session.